So, which unit should I choose? Well, we basically have different properties, we saw that, and we have a recommended unit. And before we dive into that, have a look at the quotation marks around recommended. Because as always in CSS, there are better and worse ways to achieve a goal. Therefore, this recommendation is also part of my personal experience, of course. Therefore, feel free to change that, of course, depending on the needs of your project. But I think to give you a general guidance, this slide might be really helpful in the future. So, having said that, let's have a look at the properties we had, because we know our properties, right? Let's start with the font size property. Important, the root element. We talked about that when we decided if we want to add a specific font size to our HTML element. One recommended unit is percentage. We had a look at that. Applying 100%, well, doesn't make a lot of sense, but you can do that if you want to. But you could apply 75% or some value below 100% in case you want to make sure that the default font size on your website is smaller than the browser setting. Another possible unit is, of course, this one, nothing. And that's also the one we use in this course because I explained that. We want to decide how the font sizes change depending on specific elements, but in general, the font size can be in line with the browser setting. The second property we can use to apply some units to is the font size in general. Here we saw that rem is probably a nice idea to follow. It's easy to use, it's easy to see also for other developers, and if you didn't apply any kind of specific font size to the root element, it's always clear that the font size with rem refers to this root element. You can also use M, we saw that, but I would recommend only using it for children, so not some M chains, so applying M to the parent, to the child, and to other childs, because you saw it in the example, it can get messy quickly, and I'm not sure if you like that. But as I said, I do not recommend just using rem actually. You can use both and play around. I personally prefer rem though. The next properties are the padding and the margin. We saw that in our example on the website. We used rem for both. Of course, if you want to have a different behavior and you say you want to have fixed margins between the elements, feel free to not apply rem right here. Then we had the border, where we followed a different approach. For the border, we used pixels, because my rationale is that a border should just, well, be a border, but I don't want to have a border of, 30 pixels in the end. That's definitely not something you normally want, so I would recommend using pixels for borders. Then we had width and height, and for these we have two options. We can either use percentages. The important thing about percentages though is that we always have to be aware of the containing block, which depends on the position property applied to our element. We were diving into that in a lot of detail. And we can use VW or VH, viewport width, viewport height, or view min, view max. We also saw that. Which one do I recommend? Well, to be honest, it depends, of course, on what you want to achieve. If you want to relate your width or height to the viewport, I think choosing the viewport unit is definitely not a bad idea. On the other hand, you can also solve this issue with the position fixed property, for example, and percentages. So again, you are free to choose either of the two, because I would stick in most cases to these. An exception right here is maybe max width or min width. We saw that. There it's also possible to use pixels, because you might want to set a real pixel-based limit for your maximum width of specific elements. I also showed you an example how this would work. Now for the top and bottom properties, so how we can move our elements, well, I would normally stick to percentages, because there you normally need the relation to your containing block, so why wouldn't you use percentages? Definitely a good idea right here. The same thing is true for left and right, of course. There, using percentages would also be my recommendation. Now, I said it in the beginning, and I have to repeat myself, this is not the final and definite guidance how to approach such problems, but it's supposed to be a good starting point for you in case you are not sure about a specific property and which unit might be a good selection in combination with that property. With that, we are getting closer towards the end of this module. There is one quick tip though, another one that I have for you that can help you to quickly center your elements. Let's have a look at this tip in the next lecture.